Welcome back to your South King County Real Estate Update. My name is Sarah Eggleston, and I am with Stone Egg Realty at Berkshire Hathaway. I'm back to deliver your local real estate news for the month. Go ahead and jump on into these slides. So it is December 2024, and we are very quickly closing in on the end of the year. I have my housing market update recap and predictions episode coming up on Friday, December 27th. So 2 weeks from now, coming soon. I do this every year. It's one of my favorite episodes. It's a little longer, or tends to be, than other episodes because we kind of go back through 2024, see what happened and what it looks like will happen in 2025. More announcements. I have a few upcoming classes. January 9th, this is House Hunting Made Simple, a beginner's guide to home buying. So this is a first-time home buyer class. If you haven't bought a home in a long time, I would recommend taking a first-time home buyer class because a lot has changed in the industry in the last several years. So depending on how long it's been, maybe a lot has changed. And I have another one at the end of January, January 30th. This one's called The Perfect Transition, Selling Your Home and Buying Your Next. So using the equity in your current home, how can we use that to move to your next home and only move once, not end up in a rental, not end up homeless, or any of that. So just making it a nice, smooth transition. There's a few different ways to do that. So we're going to go through all of your options, give you the option to see what works best for you. And then this one is not posted quite yet. We're working on getting it together, but February 9th, I'll be hosting an investor class with a lender, a property manager, and myself. So there'll be 3 instructors on this class. So stay tuned for more details. This is great for anybody who's looking to get into investing in real estate. And we'll talk about ways to do that with your current home equity, or if you don't own a home, how you can purchase a home that you can turn into an investment property of some sort. Make sure to stay tuned for that. If you are really wanting to take this class, reach out and I'll make sure I get the details to you as soon as possible. But that'll be on February 9th. The winter buyer and seller guides are available now. Just shoot me a message and I can send one over to you. If you want a hard copy, I can print one out and meet up with you or send it to you. And there's also a first-time homebuyer guide. So if you're interested in getting one of these little booklets, just let me know and I'll send one over. And into the news, Seattle area housing market sluggish ahead of holidays. So that is what we would expect to see with the trends this time of year. After a burst of activity in October, the Seattle area housing market slowed to a more typical pace in November. So we have fewer homes hitting the market, fewer homes going pending right now than the rest of the year. But December is kind of the low point for the market, just not as many people buying in December. Some sellers have even taken their home off the market so that they can just get through the holidays and then relist next year. So the more sluggish pace of listings and home sales, partially seasonal, reflects the pressures facing Seattle area homebuyers. For more than 2 years, the combination of high mortgage rates and high prices has throttled many people's ability to buy a home in the region. In King County here, the median home sold for $925,000 in November, down 4% from October, but up 4.5% from a year earlier. So we are ahead of where we were last year, even if we have dropped since October. And remember, these are November numbers because we're in December now, so we're recapping November. Prices are climbing faster on the east side than in Seattle year over year, while the median east side home sale price increased 10% to $1.5 million. The median Seattle home price was up just 2.5% to $968,000. So very area specific for what's happening price wise. These are the 4 local counties on a chart. You can see we have tipped down in King County from the high point back in the spring and summer. We're trailing down at the end here in all of the areas. Kitsap is just about flat from a month prior. This is seasonally what we'd expect to see. This bump here in October, not what we'd expect to see. Generally, October doesn't have more activity than September had, but this year it did. And for condos, median King County condos sold for 565, 500 last month, up 17% from a year earlier. So the condo prices had gone down quite a bit during the pandemic because people wanted more space, they wanted a yard, because everyone was at home. So now that that's up, people are appreciating the conveniences that condos offer as far as accessibility, reduced maintenance. You don't have to take care of a yard if you're in a condo, or most condos. So those condo sales, condo prices are stronger than they were a year ago. It is still a struggle for the first time home buyer because of higher interest rates and the prices staying high. That has reduced buyer demand in our region. And part of it's because we've been under constructed for a long time. We have constructed way too few properties for decades now, and we're just lacking supply. And a lot of people are locked in with that low mortgage rate. So even resale homes, we're seeing fewer of because people have this low mortgage rate and it doesn't make sense for them to move to a place where they would pay more unless they have a compelling reason to move. If they're moving out of state for a job or to take care of a family member, or if they have a baby and need a bigger house, that sort of thing. So just changing family and job dynamics, those still, as they will always, prompt moves. But if people don't have to move, a lot of them aren't right now. The amount of current King County homes that we have for sale would sell out in about 6 weeks. So this is still a seller's market, but it is way, way less intense than it was a few years ago when things were just staying on the market for a few days. Now they're staying on a little bit longer on average, and buyers have a little bit more time to look around, think about how they want to structure their offer rather than just seeing something and needing to jump on it right away. It's predicted that the Seattle area housing market will remain sluggish through the end of the year and first part of 2025, with little mortgage rate relief on the horizon. But more supply is likely to come on next year. Heading into February, March, we will see an increase in inventory available, homes coming to the market. So there'll be a little bit more to choose from for home buyers. And depending on what interest rates do next year, maybe have a little less time to think about whether they want to put an offer in on that home or not. Things may pick up as we head through the year next year. Home sales and condo sales, the light line is this past year and the blue line is 2023. So we have had more home sales than we have compared to last year. Same is true for the Seattle and East Side on condos and North King. Southwest King and Southeast King, we did have more condo sales this year in November than we did a year ago. For home prices, median home price, we are ahead of where we were last year in almost all categories. North King is just slightly behind where it was last year. Seattle is pretty much even on condo sale prices. East Side, North King, Southwest King are ahead of where we were last year, and South King is just a little behind. And that brings us to our hyperlocal breakdown, where we look at Kent, Renton, Auburn, and Federal Way. You can see this big dip in new listings coming to the market this year from last month. And we are down on new listings in Kent and Renton from last year, but up in Auburn and Federal Way. Up in Federal Way by almost 23%. So like I said, it's all very specific to the area you're looking at, what's going on there. But all areas have come down in new listings from last month. Pending sales is also down from last month, but ahead in all categories of where we were 1 year ago. For median days on market, we have Federal Way that did dip down from last month by quite a bit, but it's 50% higher than we were 1 year ago. 18 days on market is the average in Federal Way, up 81% in Auburn from where we were a year ago. 29 days on market now, 26 in Kent, and 17 in Renton. So we can see that homes are sitting on the market a lot longer, unless we're looking just a couple months back on Federal Way. For median sales price, we are ticking down in Kent and Federal Way, but up in Auburn and Renton from last month. Not seasonally what we'd expect to see, but the smaller the sample size, the more likely we get these big fluctuations in these numbers. For mortgage rates, last month when we met, our weekly average was 6.84. Our daily average last month was 7.03. And if we bring it to today's weekly average, it is 6.6. And that has dropped a little bit from last week at 6.69, but not a drastic movement there. And it is the third week in a row that the average mortgage rate has dropped. So that's a good trend to see. The elevated mortgage rates and rising home prices have kept homeownership out of reach for many would-be home buyers. U.S. home sales are on track for their worst year since 1995. So we are just selling fewer homes across the nation this year in 2024. So I would guess that we will have more home sales in 2025 heading forward, but only time will tell, I suppose. This is nationally, since we're talking about mortgage rates. Existing home sales are down quite a bit from where we were a year ago. Mortgage applications did rise this past week for the fifth straight week. That just shows our buyer demand. People are heading into the market looking to purchase a home and getting their pre-approval done. And home prices are near all-time highs and still rising nationally. But we should see interest rates come down ever so slightly as we head forward, but it's not going to be a ton of relief. A lot of people are predicting that rates will remain above 6% throughout the year next year. And for our daily interest rate, it is 6.95. So we are down slightly from the daily interest rate we looked at last month, but this whole month, we've seen a pretty big increase for such a short period of time. With the house price increases, some people are worried about a new housing bubble, but mortgage debt isn't a concern, and lending standards are much better now than during the bubble. And this is from Bill McBride. I know there's been people predicting on the internet that there will be a housing crash. I've heard this from a few different avenues, but the professionals are not really looking at that being a strong possibility because consumer debt is at a record level, which is kind of where the whole bubble crash idea is coming from. Is they're looking just at these numbers going, oh my gosh, look how high the mortgage debt is in our nation compared to any time throughout history. But if we look at just home mortgage debt compared to the total homeowner equity, this gap has never been greater. So people have more equity in their homes on average than they ever have before. So if they get in trouble financially, it's not going to be lose your house, crash bubble situation. Just a couple quotes here. Equity growth has begun to moderate along with broader home prices in recent months. And that's still the largest volume of equity we've seen on record, adjusting for seasonality. The average homeowner nationally now has $319,000 of equity in their home, of which $207,000 could be borrowed against while still maintaining a 20% equity cushion. So the lenders really want you to keep that 20% cushion once you have it. So if you want to get a HELOC or take equity out of your house, they'll only take it down to 20% equity for you. And for a homeowner in the early stage of foreclosure, that equity helps them avoid a foreclosure sale, either by leveraging the equity to pay down the past due mortgage bills or by selling their property in order to protect the equity that they'd otherwise lose at the auction. So people have options now. If they get into a tight place financially, they're most likely not going to lose the house to foreclosure. They're just going to sell it and take that money out or take equity out and pay the back balance. Serious mortgage delinquencies remain low. So we have more mortgage delinquencies happening now than a year ago, but not by much. Like back here, this is what when the crash happened, there were so many people that had to foreclose on their homes. They just really couldn't afford them anymore. They were underwater. The home wasn't worth what they owed on it. That is not the case now. Now the home is worth more in the vast majority of situations. The home is worth more than people owe on it, so they can just sell it and walk away, usually with some extra cash. Foreclosures, we had a foreclosure moratorium during the pandemic. When that lifted, people were scared that more foreclosures were going to spike and go out of control. But it's nothing like the crash back here. There's relatively few foreclosures happening in today's timeframe. To wrap up, I have my upcoming class for first-time home buyers. on January 9th. January 30th is the class for people who own a home and want to move and use that equity to purchase their new home. February 9th is the real estate investing class. Buyer and seller guides and first time home buyer guide. Let me know if you want one. And the 27th, 2 weeks from today, is the housing market recap for 2024 and 2025 predictions. So I didn't go into too much today about what we're looking at heading forward because you'll get that in 2 weeks. And I do have an open house on Sunday. If anyone wants to stop by and say hi, I'll be in Renton. Beautiful home. It's listed at 2.1 and it's 4,620 square feet. Huge house, 5 acres, view of Rainier. So if you want to stop by and say hi and look at a pretty view, I highly encourage you to do that. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. My phone number and email address are on the screen there. I'd love to have a conversation with you about what's happening in your area or an area you're interested in possibly moving to, and just talking through any questions you may have. Let me know what your questions are, and I'd be happy to answer them. Thanks again for joining me for your South King County real estate update. I'll be back in 2 weeks with your 2024 recap, 2025 predictions episode. It's probably my favorite episode of the year just because it's a fun look back at the year that's gone by and kind of fun to watch the predictions episode at the end of the year and see how close I was, how close the experts were on what was going to happen. Thank you so much for joining me. I will be back here in 2 weeks and I hope to see you then. Have a very happy holidays and see you soon.